Hey guys, hope you're well. So, if you were somebody who used to be a non Muslim and you became a Muslim, one of the reasons why you became a Muslim is probably because you're looking for a life of spiritual meaning, you're looking for a life of significance, of meaning. And one of the things you're turned off by within secular societies, you possibly believe a lot of it's to do with hedonism or to do with just sensory pleasure, of just trying to get a nice career, trying to get some money, trying to get creature comforts, a nice home, all these kind of things. You might see it things that way. Whereas in the alternative, in one of the reasons why you're probably attracted to Islam is because you see a life of meaning, a life of dignity, a life of tradition, a life of devotion to God, right? So that may be one of the reasons why you converted. But in that, I think there's some kind of there's an interesting what's the word, incongruence. I think with something at the heart of traditional Islam is if somebody dedicated their life to acquiring creature comforts, to getting a nice home, to eating the best food, to having lots of sex, etc., you would probably see that person as quite superficial, of lacking, of being in spiritual poverty, and that's probably how you probably see a lot of secular society as lacking that. The thing is, I've just described Islamic heaven. If you ever look at the way heaven is described, it's a really, really selfish thing. It's just about how good it is for you, how great it will be for you to have reclining on these beautiful furniture, to have like rivers of what was it, wine and honey or something like this, and have the best food you can ever have, and the sights are really amazing, and literally just do that for eternity. That's what heaven is in Islamic tradition. So that one of the core reasons for being a Muslim, and one of the core things promoted, is to do things to get to heaven, to get to Jannah, as they say. Is we need to do things to get to heaven. We need to do. Whenever I used to listen to the people who used to go out and do dawah to fellow Muslims, Tabligh Jamaat they're called. They would always talk about heaven. When I was talking to people who wanted me to, who were Orthodox Muslims or the Salafis, when they would talk about you need to be on the right doctrine, etc., they would talk about heaven. A lot of non-Muslims would talk about these people are going to, or Muslims would talk about non-Muslims like they're going to hell, blah 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 blah. So it was always about heaven and hell. That's the main thing: is hell, or heaven, heaven, heaven. And heaven, when you look at it, is a really selfish thing. It's just, like I said, it's just about your own pleasure and how much pleasure you can have for the rest of eternity. And is that the aim, really, of the spiritual life? Is just to go to a place where you can basically get all the things you would like to get in this life, right? So all the things you want to get in this life, such as all the creature comforts, having loads of sex, or having a really nice home, or having really great tasting food, it's seen as spiritual, not to want it in this life, but to want it in the next life. To me, that seems really superficial, actually. Whereas, in contrast, there are other spiritual traditions that don't look at things like that. One of them, which I like a lot, is the tradition of Emanuel Swedenborg, who was a mystic and theologian. And he said his perspective, his experience was that heaven was two things: it was a mindset and it was a place. And the difference, the contrast between the Islamic heaven, the traditional Islamic heaven, and Emanuel Swedenborg's perspective on heaven is this: is that there was joy in heaven, and he classes joy as the kind of things we're talking about, is getting together with people and laughing, having great food, having beautiful sights to look at, having nice homes and nice clothes and all these kind of things. That was there, joy, and he calls that joy. But he says on a deeper level and a foundation of joy, and then the only way joy can arise was this second one. And he says the people of heaven get the most pleasure from helping others. That's where they get a huge amount of pleasure. That is the foundation of their life, and that's the foundation, the reason why they are in heaven, in regards to the mindset and to the actual place. It's about helping others, developing the thoughts, the intention, the desire, the motivation to help others. That's the primary motivation in life. Doesn't mean you don't have other motivations in life, but the primary motivation is to help others, to be of use to other human beings. And he says that is what heaven is. Heaven is filled with people who have that primary love, that primary motivation. And that creates heaven. And that, he says, that motivation is God. That motivation is God's essence, which is love, just pure love, pure goodwill, pure loving kindness. That's God's essence. And it's, in the Islamic tradition as well, they have it like Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. And like I said, I think that's a beautiful notion of heaven. And like I said, it's in contrast to the Islamic perspective, the mainstream Islamic perspective, which is heaven is this place of self-indulgence. So why am I saying this? I think one of the great things that Islam can do in order to reform, right, because there is an ongoing problem with extremism within a religion. I'm sure you'll agree with that. If you're a Muslim watching this, there is an ongoing problem with extremism, and the people who are most harmed by extremism are Muslims themselves. The overwhelming majority of victims are Muslims. And one of the things I really think can do to combat the extremism is to develop a spirituality based around virtue, the development of virtue, of goodwill, of kindness, of generosity, of patience, of forgiveness. These qualities, I really think that is a really good thing to emphasize. And here's the thing, it's already within the tradition of Islam. It's called Sufism. And one of the things the Sufis really emphasize is not going to heaven, is not trying to get to heaven. It's about developing a loving relationship with God. It's about developing good character and good qualities. And that's what I really think the Islamic tradition really needs to do, is really embrace the notion of virtue over everything. Virtue over correct doctrine. Virtue over correct actions, such as wearing a hijab or doing salah or fasting. Not saying you have to need to neglect those things or not do them, but the primary thing that determines whether you're a good Muslim or not, it needs to be, in my opinion, needs to be virtue. It's not about doing the outward actions. It's not about having the minutiae of creed perfect, right? The complete perfect interpretation of doctrine. And it's not about going to this place in the afterlife where you get to be self-indulgent. Primarily, it's about developing a loving relationship with your Creator. Primarily, it's about developing a loving relationship with everything, to human beings, to the environment, and that's primarily what it's about. I'm a broken, flawed human being. I'm not trying to tell you exactly how to do that. Like I said, there are beautiful traditions within Islam that can do that. I'm just saying I think that's can be a really good thing to combat extremism. Because the problem with when you put doctrine and actions over virtue is you fill in the gaps with whatever's there in your character. So Muhammad, if we look at Muhammad, I think objectively, Muhammad was probably the most violent religious leader that's probably ever lived or existed. And he did a lot of violent actions. In comparison to people like Jesus and Buddha, he didn't do any of those things. He's quite a violent person. How you interpret the violence and the motivation behind the violence, I think, is crucial, and I think influences a lot of what we see in Islamic societies, or how you view the caliphate and how you view a lot of the violence that happened. What's more important, the letter of the law, the spirit, or the spirit of the law? A lot of Islamic tradition, and what I've seen, my experience, is the letter of the law is more important. Like I said, the actions, the adhering to the external criteria, following the sunnah, following doing the fasting, the prayer, and everything like this. And it's all about external action, and that's how you be a good Muslim. The state of your heart doesn't really matter that much, right? So whether you go, how you go, you might go around thinking thoughts of revenge. You might go around thinking thoughts of you don't like this person, you don't like that person, being very opinionated, being liking to get into conflict, like arguments, or even aggressive conflicts, or being passive aggressive. You might have thoughts running through your mind all day, every day, doing that. You might actually feed those thoughts, right? Because you can't help the thoughts sometimes that go through your mind, but you might actually feed those thoughts, and that's considered fine. That's not really, you're not really spoken about that much. But the 5 pillars of religion, that's the very strong term, the foundation of the religion are actions. And then, like I said, you can fill in those actions any way you want. So you can look at Muhammad's actions as violence, as through the lens of dominance, through the lens of anger, through the lens of rage, through the lens of revenge. You can look at it through that lens, or you can look at it through the lens of protection, you can look at it through the lens of goodwill. And then you can start looking, are my actions motivated by goodwill? Would engaging in these violent acts, or would supporting this particular ideology, is that goodwill? Is that applicable for this day and age? Would that actually be an act of kindness in this day and age, to support a caliphate and try to impose a caliphate? Would that be an act of goodwill in this day and age, in this context? Because wisdom requires an understanding of context, right? There are Muslim scholars like Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. who says he doesn't believe in this day and age a caliphate would work at all, so he doesn't advocate it. And some people might say you're a sellout. I think he's applying what's called wisdom. There are times, to my corners of Islamic tradition, when certain aspects of the caliphate will be taken away and certain things will be added, because one of the reasons is because there was an understanding of context, and wisdom requires an understanding of context. What I'm saying, because I'm going to wrap up this video, the message of this video is to say that there are things that are more important than the external, and that's the internal, the character of a person. The internal transformation is I think the most important thing when it comes to religion. I think religion at its best is a methodology for internal change towards goodness, and religion becomes religion is poor. Religion makes the world worse when it becomes about the externals, when it becomes about when it becomes literalist. Because if religion doesn't make you a better person, what's the point? Then it just descends into supremacy, just descends into elitism, just descends into tribalism. That's what it becomes about, is I'm part of the save group, you're not. Or we're going to a place where we can indulge in self-indulgence and you won't. You're going to be tortured mercilessly for all eternity. And so what I'm saying is that look within. You know? I really think we need spiritual traditions and religious traditions that really teach us to look within. And although I'll end it by saying this, although I'm aiming this at Muslims, and if you're a Muslim watching this, you might be like, why are you picking on us, or have that sense of persecution? This is not a problem I personally see with Islam. I think this is a really big problem in many, many traditions. A lot of traditions are now become, I think, about self-actualization. It's become about the self and less about developing goodwill, developing loving kindness, expanding the circle of concern to all beings. That's what I think is the highest path of spirituality. I'm not saying I embody that at all. I'm just saying I think that's the highest path. But if you look at a lot of traditions, a lot of Western traditions, what about achievement, getting the life you want, individual happiness? A lot of the New Age traditions are about just about developing psychic powers or self-exploration and self-discovery. And it's all about self. And Islamic traditions now, unfortunately, well, it's the same. It's about going to a place of self-indulgence and self-salvation and these kind of things. So what I think is we need return to traditions and promotion of traditions that talk about developing loving kindness, talk about developing goodwill, talk about developing universal love. And I need that. I need more cultures that do that, and I think we all need that. So if you're a Muslim watching this, there are beautiful things within your tradition, promoting goodwill, promoting universal love, promoting loving kindness. So please bring them to the surface. Please promote them more. So okay guys, take care.